As a teenager, Jenna Bush Hager disclosed a code name she used for hotels. Doesn't she sound like she's having fun? An anecdote from Jenna Bush Hager's adolescence is being declassified. On the September 23rd program, the 43-year-old anchored Today with Jenna and Friends disclosed a code name she was assigned to use when making hotel reservations during her father, George W. Bush's transition from Texas governor to the U.S. president. Now, could you tell us your name? When 47-year-old guest co-host Chanel Jones questioned whether it was classified or anything, Bush Hager said, "Let's declassify it." "I was Holly Crawford," Bush Hager added. "Holly seems like a lot of fun, doesn't she?" Well, I didn't think of it. The mother of three revealed that she started using the identity when she was just an 18-year-old youngster, which would have been a year before her dad's first term as president started and the year of his 2000 presidential election. To safeguard their privacy and hide their location, prominent politicians and celebrities frequently check into hotels using aliases. Jones questioned whether the Secret Service came up with the alias, akin to the code names given politicians and their family for security and customary reasons. "I suppose so. In addition to Holly Bush, Crawford was the name of the house in Texas where my parents lived. Holly, I'm not sure. Bush Hager, whose real secret?" Bush Hager remarked, "All I know is, if Holly Crawford walks here, she's ready to order a margarita," in reference to the one secret alias. Jenna Bush Hager's revelation of her teenage hotel alias, Holly Crawford, may seem on the surface like a quirky tidbit, the sort of playful anecdote daytime talk shows thrive on. But when examined more carefully, it becomes a prism through which larger truths about American politics, celebrity culture, security, and family life can be understood. In expanding the lens, we see that what is being disclosed here is not just a name, but a narrative about identity, secrecy, and the human side of political dynasties. The first point worth stressing is how deeply humanizing this story is. For much of their adolescence, Jenna and her twin sister Barbara were cast in the shadow of their father's presidential run and eventual time in the White House. To the public, they were not ordinary young women, but symbols, extensions of the Bush legacy, figures on whom expectations, scrutiny, and media fascination were projected. Yet this alias, Holly Crawford, strips away the veneer of grandeur and brings us back to universal struggles of adolescence, the desire for freedom, anonymity, and fun. Jenna's laughter when recalling the alias reminds us that, despite the extraordinary circumstances of her upbringing, she was still an 18-year-old navigating the same challenges of identity and independence that millions of other young people face. Second, the alias highlights the paradoxical nature of American democracy. Presidents and their families are meant to embody the idea of being ordinary citizens elevated to extraordinary service. They live in the people's house, attend public events, and symbolize accessibility. Yet in reality, their daily lives are shaped by extraordinary restrictions. For Jenna, this meant living under Secret Service watch, navigating the constant presence of security teams, and even checking into hotels under false names to avoid being recognized. The irony here is striking. In order to remain safe and somewhat ordinary, the Bush daughter had to assume an identity that was entirely fabricated. Thus, Holly Crawford becomes a symbol of the paradoxical balance between openness and secrecy that defines the American presidency. Third, the anecdote illuminates the role of humor as a coping mechanism. Over the years, Jenna Bush Hager has embraced a public persona rooted in warmth, relatability, and humor. By laughing about Holly Crawford being the kind of woman ready to order a margarita, she reclaims what might once have felt burdensome and reframes it as a funny story to share with her audience. This act of reclaiming the narrative is powerful. It turns a symbol of lost anonymity into a symbol of agency. Rather than being defined by security protocols imposed on her as a teenager, she defines the alias on her own terms as an adult. This is a subtle but significant act of empowerment. The cultural implications are also worth exploring. In an age of 24/7 media, celebrity culture, and the internet, the idea of aliases resonates beyond presidential families. Many public figures, actors, athletes, musicians, use pseudonyms when traveling or interacting with the public. What distinguishes Jenna's story is a political dimension. Unlike celebrities who choose fame, Jenna was born into it. She did not seek publicity but inherited it, and thus her alias embodies not just a personal need, but a broader reflection on how society views the children of leaders. Americans have always been fascinated by the private lives of presidents and their families, often holding them to conflicting standards, expecting them to be both private citizens and public figures. The alias Holly Crawford fits neatly into this fascination, offering a peek behind the curtain without betraying anything truly intimate. In a broader historical context, Jenna's anecdote can be placed alongside other stories of presidential children adapting to life in the spotlight. Chelsea Clinton, for instance, navigated adolescence with dignity under intense tabloid scrutiny. Malia and Sasha Obama, growing up in the age of smartphones, were constantly analyzed on social media. Amy Carter's childhood was marked by images of her roller skating in the White House. Each of these stories reminds us that presidential children live in a liminal space between personal identity and public expectation. For Jenna, Holly Crawford was both a shield and a symbol of that liminality. Finally, there is the question of memory and legacy. By revealing her alias decades later, Jenna participates in the creation of presidential folklore. Just as Americans remember the quirks of presidents, Abraham Lincoln's storytelling, John F. Kennedy's wit, Ronald Reagan's love of jelly beans, they also remember the anecdotes that humanize their families. Holly Crawford may not be a central chapter in the history of the Bush administration, but it is the kind of story that enriches the human tapestry surrounding the presidency. It transforms abstract power into relatable experience, policy into personality, history into memory. In the end, the true significance of Jenna Bush Hager's disclosure lies not in the name itself, but in what it represents. It represents a negotiation of identity in the public eye, the tension between freedom and protection, the ways humor can heal and connect, and the enduring public fascination with the human side of political dynasties. Holly Crawford is more than an alias. It is a metaphor for the dual lives presidential children must lead, constantly balancing the ordinary and the extraordinary. As Jenna herself joked, Holly Crawford was ready to order a margarita. That lighthearted line perfectly encapsulates the heart of the story, a reminder that behind the formalities of state, the security protocols, and the global spotlight, there are individuals who long to laugh, live, and enjoy the simple freedoms most of us take for granted. And sometimes, those freedoms come not in one's own name, but in the borrowed identity of someone like Holly Crawford, an alias that will now forever be remembered as part of the personal history of one of America's first families.